I'm Sarah Cameron from SENSCOT. Hopefully many of you will have heard of SENSCOT, but just in case, we're a national intermediary and part of our work is to support the social enterprise networks across Scotland, and that includes a tourism social enterprise network as well. So before we begin, can I just give you a quick reminder of Zoom etiquette, although I'm sure you're all pros by now. If you wouldn't mind keeping yourself muted if you're not speaking. Yeah. Please use the chat function. This is, we're keeping it like this as a big room because I'm really keen for you all to be able to speak to each other, swap ideas, thoughts. So please use the chat function. Add any comments in there and add any questions as well. If you'd like to speak, there's the raise hand button. And if you're struggling to see it, sometimes it hides within the participants section. So if you click on participants, you'll see just at the bottom there's a wee bit that says raise hand. You can also do reactions if you want to clap or send love hearts or anything else.
Okay. Yeah.
And the other thing is that Jonathan from Speakeasy is here. He's hiding. He's not showing himself.
Yeah, it was on the original text, but yeah.
Oh, that's somebody. Could somebody mute themselves, please? So he's here running things smoothly in the background. So if you've got any problems at all,
that's at the end of April. Sorry,
I'm going to find the person that's talking and mute them. There we go. They're hidden. Yeah. So if you've got any problems, just get in touch with Jonathan on the chat function. He'll be able to help. I'm going to give you a very quick rundown of the agenda we've got planned. So after hearing me, we're going to hear from Andrew Ward from Creetown Initiative. Andrew, do you want to give us a wave? Andrew is going to give us a provocation called What is Good for Communities is Good for Tourism. Following that, we're going to see a short video from Kirkcudbright. We're going to take some time to run a poll as well. In fact, we're going to do several polls. We're going to have a little practice session in a moment. But this is your opportunity really to have your voice heard. And then we're going to hear a response from some panel members and hopefully some time for some questions as well. So just before we begin, a quick reminder again, please, to keep yourself muted. And I'm just going to give you a super quick overview of our community-led tourism proof of concept project, a bit of a mouthful. But we've been developing this project over a number of years, but things have accelerated quite quickly over the past year. And I think, in fact, before I come to that, what I think something that I would really like to say is that I want to acknowledge the difficult year that the tourism industry has had and has experienced. Can I get hands up if you're actually operating in the tourism industry just now? Yeah. So there's a few folk out there that are in this at the moment and having a difficult time. And there have been numerous negative impacts. But we're not out of the woods yet, and I would like to stress the intention of this session is to focus on the positive. So we want to stay solution focused, and we're going to look to the future. This is about a different approach to tourism that is rooted in communities. However, if there are any issues that we're not covering, will you please put them into the chat function? This is just the beginning of the conversation, so if you feel that there is something worth saying, please say it. Just before I come back to the community-led tourism proof of concept, I think that we should run a little poll because I think it would be really useful to see who is in the room. So this is a wee practice session. Some of you may have had the poll thing before and know what to do. But if we could, Jonathan, if we could please have the first question come up. You should get a wee box in front of you. And it's asking you where you live. And we will see, as people come in, we'll be able to see what the numbers look like. So I'm seeing overwhelmingly that it's rural Scotland, which is not a surprise, followed closely by the islands, a few urban folk, and we've got somebody international in the room as well, which is really fantastic. So that's really useful to see, actually. Okay, can we follow that up, please, then, with the second question? So we can everybody see the answers there? Are people seeing the results? Do I have to click the, you can? No? Yes? No, you can't? Share results. Can you see that now? Yay! This is a learning curve. So there you go. You can see that Rural Scotland comes out there right on top. Okay, let's go to the second poll then, because I think this will be quite telling as well. So the second question, what's your involvement in the tourism industry? So private sector, community organisation or social enterprise, that's kind of covering third sector, support organisations, tourism policy, so that's government or local authority or local residents, or none of the above, if you fit into something else that we haven't quite covered there. I can see the numbers going up, and I'm now aware that you can't see the numbers going up, so it's going to be a surprise for you as to who comes out on top. We've still got, I think we've still got a couple of more, or one more person to vote. Okay, I'm sharing the results now. So again, we've got a strong lead there in third sector organisations, but we've also got private sector represented, which is fantastic, support organisations, tourism policy, a couple of local residents, and then we've got some others. I'd be quite keen to know who the others are, if you want to pop down in the chat, if you feel that you didn't come into any of those, where you're from, because I think it would be really interesting to know. So I think that's quite useful, because we kind of get a feel for who's in the room now, and the different areas that you're kind of be coming from. Okie dokie. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the community-led tourism proof of concept project. So that's that great big long title that we've got. So we've been working, as I mentioned earlier, we were working with a number of partners, including the Scottish Government, DTAS, who are here today, Creetown Initiative, who are here today. We've also connected with Visit Scotland, Scottish Tourism Alliance, HI, Scottish Enterprise, a number of different partners. And it really is a proof of concept project, but we're working in two particular areas. So that is the communities of Brechin and Girvan, and we're supporting them to develop their tourism offer. Now, as I said, it's a proof of concept. So as this project continues, we'll be gathering information about the process and the outcomes, and a lesson learned report will be published next year to share widely. The project itself comes from many years of working with social enterprises, working within the tourism industry, and is based on our belief at Senscot that empowering community-led organisations can have a phenomenal impact on communities. And we believe that communities should be empowered to take ownership of their tourism offer so that it benefits all. So this means that the benefit is extended, and Andrew's provocation is going to touch on some of this. We also believe that while there are a huge number of examples from across Scotland, many of you will be here today, there isn't one clear route to support, and I suspect that those of you that are involved in tourism would probably agree with this. Unless you already have a relationship with a support organisation, it could be quite difficult to get started. So with this project, we're hoping to highlight the support requirements and the resources needed. The new tourism strategy, of course, was launched last year and had communities at its heart. So I think that we were certainly very excited to see that and have fairly high expectations. And from what I'm seeing, and when I'm speaking to folk out there, it seems to me that other people are feeling the same way, that, you know, there's an opportunity here for us really to make significant changes at how things are done in Scotland. So our view is, let's make sure community has a voice within the tourism industry at a policy level as well as a local level, and that communities are empowered and resourced to take a leadership role. I'm not going to talk much more about that project, but if anybody would like more information, please just get in touch. I'm happy to have a chat. I'm happy to send some stuff through, or if you're interested in connecting with those communities, I'm happy to provide an introduction as well. Now, I want to keep moving on because I'm aware of time, and I want to have an opportunity for you guys to speak as well. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So Andrew, who already gave us a wee wave, has been a member of the Tourism SEN for a number of years, and before that, in fact, one of the local networks as well. He's got a huge amount of experience working in communities. He's obviously working on this project with us just now, and he's got a huge amount of experience working in the tourism industry as well. I'm also going to ask Andrew to introduce the video from Kirkcudbright as well after his provocation. So Andrew, can I please pass over to you?
Okay, thank you everybody. So my provocation is about if it's good for locals, it's good for tourists, and why communities matter. So good afternoon everybody. My name is Andrew Ward. I'm the Senior Manager with Cretan Initiative, a development trust based in South West Scotland. I also manage our trading arm, Barhome Enterprise Limited, a consultancy service. And I've been involved with community regeneration for 30 years. I'm currently working with Sarah Cameron on Senscott on the pilot community tourism project in Girvan and Breaking. So today I'd like to talk to you about communities and tourism. And every time I move your pictures. So I want to start by saying I recently read an article written by a tourism professional which stated the importance of tourism can be viewed from two perspectives: the tourism industry and the tourist. And that statement made me think, surely there's something missing here. There is a third perspective: local partners, stakeholders, the communities who live in the villages and towns and cities that we visit. The benefit to them is equally important, and where there is no benefit locally, there is a potential for conflict, which can damage the tourism product, so nobody wins. So tourism and local regeneration, they go together. Local improvements, be it a new facility, a high street facelift, a new swimming pool, all benefit local people, whilst at the same time making a place more attractive to the visitor. Rural tourism strategies cannot focus solely on the tourist. They can and should be a vehicle that helps to drive rural regeneration, which in turn demonstrates to communities the benefits of tourism. If it's good for locals, it's good for tourists. So why else do communities matter, and why should they be involved in tourism activities that happen around and sometimes despite them? Well, it matters because they're integral to the tourism offer of any given place. The response, enthusiasm, the knowledge that locals provide to visitors enhances the tourism experience. Without positive interaction, the product is diminished. Day-to-day interactions on the street set the tone. Excuse me, where's the best place to eat around here? Excuse me, how do I get to a museum? Responses that do not know or do not care set the scene and tone for the visitor. A negative response leading to a negative experience for the visitor. On the other side of the coin, there's the impact which tourism can have on local populations. The NC 500 is a prime example. It's been a phenomenal success in attracting visitors, but that success is tempered by the associated strain on basic infrastructure such as road maintenance, toilets, waste disposal. And some locals argue that the route has created a hit and run tourist habit that does not benefit small business and local communities. So if we want communities to be engaged and supportive of tourism, we have to recognise that they're most definitely a third party in the mix. As such, it's vital that communities have a role to play, that they understand the benefits of tourism, but also that their way of life is not disrupted, and that tourism is something to embrace both economically and socially. Social impact is equally important as the financial impact. Welcoming people to a community can have a positive impact on how communities see themselves. And I'm reminded of a night in the local in Cretan some years ago. A visitor was asking an old local about the nearby granite quarries. As a retired miner who had worked there for years, the old chap was talking about his favourite subject. With a glint in his eye, he had the visitor spellbound with tales of explosions, connections to Liverpool docks and the boats that used to visit. That visitor got a first-hand account of life in the quarries. Their visit was enhanced and the local man had a restored sense of pride about his life as a quarryman. So communities do matter, and they need to be considered and involved when we are planning tourism initiatives. After all, it's people that make a place. At the same time, we must understand that communities might not directly recognise that projects that they wish to take forward have a relationship and a positivity that enhances the tourism product. We therefore need to establish ways that help communities understand the benefits of tourism and help communities to link into the tourism industry networks so they can reap the benefit of increased tourism, because that can make a huge difference to whether their local project is sustainable. Linking into networks isn't easy for communities who have no experience in the field, and how to link is not always blindingly obvious, especially if the community doesn't recognise that what they're doing has a relevance to tourism. A good example of this is a community, I'm going to talk about Ballantrae, a pretty seaside village on the South Ayrshire coast. They were in danger of losing their local pub, stroke hotel, stroke restaurant. They set out to save it, not because they wanted to create a tourist facility, but because they wanted to save something for their community, the local, something which is central to community life across the country. They succeeded in saving it, though they must be wondering in the current COVID-19 world whether that was a good thing or not, but it will be a good thing in time. So apart from saving a local facility, what they have done is create something which will actually enhance the local tourism offer. This part of the world boasts a beautiful coastline. Part of the Coig and the Southwest 300 tourist routes pass through there. Both routes are well promoted, but there is a lack of facilities, places to stop, eat and drink on this section of both routes. So by saving a facility that supports their community, they've also enhanced the local tourism offer. It's good for locals, it's good for tourists. So what's missing? What help do these communities need? What's missing is the infrastructure that allows projects like these to connect to the wider industry to enable them to get their stories out there. A means to say, hey, look what we've got. A way of telling the little stories that make communities interesting to the tourist. We have the strategic framework and delivery mechanisms in place, but how do we tell the local stories that resonate with people who visit? How do we enthuse local people about tourism? In my view, we approach tourism on the basis that if it's good for locals, it's good for tourists. I'm going to give you just a couple more examples now of projects that have benefited locals and tourists. So on your left, you'll see the Barhome Arms, which is in Creetown. It was derelict, it had trees going out the roof. The community raised the money and have turned it into an enterprise centre, which has rented office space, a community charity shop, a 30-bed accommodation centre, which absolutely has been going through the roof until COVID came along. It was hitting 80% occupancy. Bike hire and repair, an electric charge point. So by creating something that's supporting a lot of community activities, it's actually supporting tourism in the village as well. Parnackie Village Shop, a few years ago, was in danger of closing, saved by the community. Now people staying at the local caravan site still have a shop, but more importantly, a remote rural village still has one. Final example is the Theatre Royal in Dumfries. The home of the Guild of Players, an amateur dramatic group who had owned the building for a number of years, but it was beyond repair and they were just about to lose it. So a major project was started and funds were raised to renovate it and bring it back to life. So the newly refurbished building is now a major performance venue. And more importantly, what it's doing, it's actually helping to grow the nighttime economy in Dumfries, which is very poor. Robert Burns was also one of the original subscribers to the Theatre Royal, and as such, that connection attracts many visitors. So here's a community group amateur dramatics who have got a place to deliver what they want to do, but at the same time, it's supporting tourism. So that's me. Just finally to repeat again, if it's good for locals, it's good for tourists. And so what we're going to show you now is we're going to show you a film of a community that's very much taken on board what's good for locals is good for tourists, and has really moved things forward quite incredibly, particularly over the last few years when things have accelerated. So if we can show the film, I'll stop sharing.
Yep.
And inspirational towns, Kirkcudbright. Sit back and relax as I take you on a virtual tour of this amazing artist's town. Situated in beautiful Dumfries and Galloway in the south of Scotland, Kirkcudbright is known as a hub of excellence for community, creativity and culture. Let's take a look. The charming royal borough of Kirkcudbright is built around a lively port. Kirkcudbright has long been a favourite amongst visitors to the south of Scotland. Its galleries, boutique shops, museum, restaurants, attractions, and the Solway Coast and Galloway Forest Park make Kirkcudbright the perfect location for a weekend break, or as a home base for families as they explore the outstanding, unspoilt beauty of Dumfries and Galloway. Life in Kirkcudbright has many positives, and one of those is the strong sense of community. There is determination to reinvigorate and regenerate the town through self-reliance, working together, and sustainable project development. Today, the community-led and locally delivered annual calendar of events is impressive. Highlights include the Tattoo, Arts and Crafts Trail, summer festivities, country fair, children's festivities, riding of the marches, Festival of Lights. The list of Kirkcudbright events and attractions goes on and continues to grow. Let's take a look at some of Kirkcudbright's flagship projects. Kirkcudbright Summer Festivities is a series of events which has become a firm fixture in the town's annual event calendar. Started in 1971, the event was formed by the Traders Association, and the first festivities chairman was Willie Ross. In their current form, Kirkcudbright Summer Festivities run from July to September and include some wonderful events for everyone. The summer festivities continue to have a significant economic impact on the town. The Tattoo and Art and Craft Trail weekends each attract around 5,000 visitors to the town. The summer festivities have also inspired other community groups and organisations to join in and develop their own events throughout the year. These include a community half marathon, a cycling sportive, a duck race, plant fairs, vintage fairs, and a whole host of festivals. The riding of the marches, children's festival, food festival, kite festival, and one of the newest additions to the events calendar, the Festival of Light, which brings the entire community out onto the streets to enjoy wonderful light displays and strikingly beautiful light installations. Over the years, Kirkcudbright's event organisers have learned and developed one key objective for all their activities: sustainability. The town has only 2 charity shops situated side by side on one of the main shopping streets. These 2 charity shops raise money for the summer festivities and swimming pool respectively. The calendar of events is an example of how a community can work together to create joy, engagement and economic benefits for everyone. Kirkcudbright Swimming Pool is another example of how the community has worked together for the benefit of all. Once more, a team of dedicated and passionate volunteers worked hard to ensure Kirkcudbright could have a community-owned swimming pool and gymnasium. Starting in the early 1980s, it took nearly 2 decades to achieve their goal. In the first year of fundraising alone, the community raised an impressive £33,000, a huge sum in the 80s, which today would be the equivalent of over £125,000. In 1997, that's 2 decades later, the Kirkcudbright swimming pool finally opened its doors. Kirkcudbright now has an entire generation of young people who have always enjoyed the benefits of a pool in their hometown. Funding for the swimming pool is generated by the charity shop, managed and staffed by community volunteers. Additional annual funding of £25,000 is provided by the local authority. The most recent improvement works in the swimming pool were completed in 2020 at a cost of £32,000. And the work was mostly done in-house by local contractors and businesses, thereby providing work to locals too. In 2017, the Silver Craigs Caravan Park, previously owned and run by Dumfries and Galloway Council, came into community ownership. An agreement was developed between the Development Trust and Kirkcudbright Swimming Pool, whereby the swimming pool staff would also manage and run the caravan park in exchange for a management fee. This arrangement helps the swimming pool and the caravan park. Silver Craigs Caravan Park is operated as a wholly owned subsidiary of the KDT charity and profits transferred annually to KDT. Kirkcudbright, the artist's town, became the town's themed identity, strengthened by the branded logo of the signature Kirkcudbright K. During each summer season, the Kirkcudbright 2000 group curated and delivered an art exhibition in the town hall. These exhibitions attracting thousands of visitors from all over the UK and beyond. For 20 years, the annual art exhibition, which was open over a 2-month period to coincide with and complement the town's summer season of festivities, attracted 25 to 30,000 visitors each year. And it was a source of huge pride to the entire community when the world-famous Monet exhibition toured Paris, New York, and Kirkcudbright. Visitor numbers to the Monet exhibition reached a staggering 60,000. Recognising the value to the economy of their town and the wider region, a partnership was developed with the local authority. And in July 2018, Kirkcudbright Galleries were officially opened by the Princess Royal. The success of Kirkcudbright's artist town identity and branding and the success of the Kirkcudbright Galleries has resulted in a number of artists choosing to relocate to the town to live and work. And it has also resulted in the opening of a number of successful commercial galleries, joining the already established Broughton House and the Harbour Cottage Gallery. Formed in 2015, the Kirkcudbright Development Trust, KDT, is a community-run and managed registered charity. The Trust represents and supports a wide range of community groups and projects. The Trust supports the Kirkcudbright Youth Project, manages the Bar Hill Community Woodland, and operates the Silver Craigs Caravan Park and the Kirkcudbright Information Centre. For the last decade, the Trust has been engaged in a major capital project to fully renovate and reinvigorate the former and much-loved Johnson School building in Kirkcudbright. The 19th century school, which closed its doors in 2010, had quickly fallen into disrepair. The Trust were able to successfully secure the future of the building, raising over £2.6 million to fully restore and develop it for use. Building works commenced in late 2019, and the work was completed in late 2020. The much anticipated grand reopening of the Johnson is planned for the spring or summer of 2021. To date, over £500,000 has been successfully raised and used to fully redevelop one section of the building and create the new and unique Dark Space Planetarium. The Trust's aspirations for the centre are for it to become the gateway attraction to Galloway's other dark sky visitor attractions, while being an educational and family-friendly experience and one of Dumfries and Galloway's flagship visitor attractions. The Trust's work at Bar Hill Wood ensures the continued health and management of the woodland and its use as an education resource, with a red squirrel hide, footpaths and a nature classroom used by pupils from all over the region. And the Kirkcudbright Information Centre, which was taken over from Visit Scotland in 2019, is staffed by volunteers and continues to provide information to over 13,000 people who visited the town in 2019, and the Trust continues to look to the future. They're now setting their sights on the Harbour Square regeneration and have a number of smaller projects supporting local organisations. Kirkcudbright's many successful projects and initiatives are impressive, and there is no doubt they have all had a hugely positive economic and social impact on the town and its residents. But it must be remembered that these achievements take many years of dedication, hard work and determination. True community regeneration must come from the community. The entire community has and continues to benefit from the community spirit, partnership, passion and can-do attitude, which is collectively ensuring Kirkcudbright remains a vibrant, creative and successful rural town in the south of Scotland, now and for future generations.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the team at Kirkcudbright as well for making such a fantastic film. I'm hoping that Andrew's provocation and the film itself has stimulated some ideas and thoughts and inspired you as well. You know, there's so much going on, and you will have so many examples as well. So please, if you've got any thoughts or comments, please put them into the chat. If you get any questions as well. I think the film certainly highlights the impact community can have on a tourism offer when they have the right people involved and the right resources. And I think that video really backs up Andrew's provocation. What is good for community is good for tourism. Certainly all these activities wouldn't happen if there wasn't a community benefit, because it wouldn't have the buy-in. So if you've got any thoughts, any questions, please pop them in the chat. Andrew's here and he can answer questions, but we can also get back to you straight after. Okay, we're moving on to the next section now, which is a poll, which this is for you to start thinking again and engaging yourself. So it's really about hearing your views, and we're going to run it's kind of two different types of polls. So similar to the first one, you'll have a little box that pops up. One type will be a statement, and we're going to ask you if you agree or disagree on a sliding scale with that statement. And then there's also going to be a couple of open-ended questions as well. So we'd like to hear your thoughts around these areas, but please just use the chat function and get as much information in there as possible. And I promise this is going to be nice and easy. I will add as well that I'm going to be using this information within my research, but we won't attribute any quotes without your direct permission, but we will use that information. And then the team, obviously, that are running the Scottish Rural Parliament will be feeding back any results at a later date as well. Okay, so I think, Jonathan, we're ready for the next question, if that pops up on folks' screens. So we're asking you if you agree or disagree. Tourism brings significant financial benefits to rural and island communities of Scotland. So we're asking you strongly agree, agree, neither agree or disagree, somewhat agree, disagree, not sure. We've got a few folk thinking carefully about this question, I think, but numbers are going up quickly. Nearly there, only a couple more folk. Okay, I'm ending polling and sharing the results, so you should be able to see that. So I think that overwhelmingly shows strongly agree with that, closely followed by agree. We've got a disagree in there and some somewhat disagrees as well. So I think that it would be good as we continue with our questions and in the open-ended question, if you can get some of your thoughts down around that question as well. Okay, I'm going to quickly move on from that one straight on to the next one. So if Jonathan, if you could pop up the next question. It will appear any moment. Are people seeing it yet? No? Yep. So communities are well supported and resourced to plan their own tourism offerings. I think this is a really interesting one as well, because I suspect that those of you who have had support will feel quite differently to those of you who are maybe thinking about embarking on a project or have been trying to do it for a while. We've got a few more folks still to answer, and then I'll share the results with you. Is everybody managing to answer it okay? We're still waiting on a few folk. I'll give you a couple more seconds, and then I'll end this one. Okay, I'm ending it now, and I'm going to share the results with you. I've learned to do that now. This is a really interesting one as well. So we've almost have a sliding scale here from agree to disagree around that support and resource. So again, I think it would be interesting to hear some of your thoughts around this, some of your experiences. So please use the chat function to kind of get these things in. And in fact, the next question we've got coming up is one of the open-ended ones. So here we go. What more could be done to support and resource communities to plan their own tourism offerings? So if you can open up the chat function and type your ideas in there, and we should start to see some things coming through. Obviously, we're not going to get a chance to go through everybody's today, but we are going to feed the information from this back. So we've got a couple of responses coming in. We've got the guys from Angus who have been involved in the Flourishing Destinations project there. A lot of support and funding for small capital projects, but no project costs yet. I think that's quite a common one as well. Okay, so I'm concerned that the money's not coming to rural locations, but rather staying in the cities, really. There's some quite interesting thoughts coming out here. Are people surprised at these, at the comments coming out here? You're all frantically writing. I should probably shut up and let you write for a moment and read each other's comments. Funding applications are tedious and soul destroying. I think many people would agree with that. The leader funding, yeah, that stopped. Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm going to keep moving and move on to the next question, but please keep on writing into the chat, because I think there's some really, really interesting thoughts in there that are incredibly relevant. And one of the things that we'll do with this information as well, we'll be sharing it with our partners that are at a national level, so those policymakers as well will get hold of this information. Okay, Jonathan, could we pop on to the next question? So we're back to that sliding scale again now. So tourism contributes to improving health and well-being of rural and island communities. So again, I think that we're going to get a mixture of answers here, and I suspect that some of those answers are going to depend on your views of health and well-being and what that kind of encompasses. We've still got some comments coming in as well. Okay, we've just got a handful of folks still to feedback. I'm aware that I'm asking you to multitask here, making you work on a Thursday afternoon. I'm guessing you're all you're all pros at this now. Okay. I think we've slowed up now. I'll give it another couple of seconds. If anybody wants to put something in, pop it in now. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share those results. So again, agree is leading, but followed behind by somewhat disagree. So we're a bit split on this one. So I think actually we'll just move straight on to the next question for this one. Now you can still pull this poll up if you want to have a wee look at it, but we're good. I think if we move straight on to the next question, because it's still related to this, and ask what more could be done to increase tourism's contribution to the health and well-being of rural communities. So those guys that agree, I'd love to hear, your examples of what's going on and the positive contribution that it's making. And those guys that are disagreeing, where are the gaps? What are the issues here? Obviously, health and well-being, huge topic at the moment over the past year. But thinking beyond COVID, thinking, back to when pre-COVID. Can anybody remember pre-COVID? And as we look forward as well to a time when we're not all in lockdown. So, well, I'm obviously loving that I'm seeing, the community focus in these answers. That's obviously okay. Okay, I'm just before we move on to the final question, Andrew, I'm going to pick on you because you're there. I'll give you a second to gather yourself. I'm just wondering if there's anything in these comments that are popping out for you that really resonate, or if there's anything in there that's completely new that you...
I think it's quite interesting that a number of people are talking about the local facilities, whether they're capable of actually managing additional tourists.
Yeah.
We suffer that in Dumfries and Galloway, where the road network is somewhat weak, to be polite. Public transport isn't great. Council have closed lots of toilets in the region. Mm-hmm. We were interested. One of the projects that's happening in Brecon is a project for local businesses to open up their toilets to the public, which seems to be actually, I was a bit surprised, seems to be getting a bit of traction behind it. But yeah, if local people feel that they're being imposed on and they can't cope with additional tourists, if they're queuing behind a queue of caravans or something, they're not going to be engaged in a positive manner into tourism. So I think it's really interesting that people are recognising that. And so the powers that be need to recognise that also, that if they want to encourage tourism, they've got to have the infrastructure in place.
Yeah. I think there's a lot in there about considerate visitors as well. There's obviously been a lot of issues with over tourism in between the lockdowns that are maybe magnified and really getting people talking as well. So, which is quite interesting. There's stuff coming out there around holiday homes and the whole Airbnb issue. Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff coming out there. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the final one, but please continue to write in the chat function, because if there's anything popping into your head, please just get that information down for us. But we're going to ask you another one again. We're on that sliding scale. So communities are represented and have a voice in planning tourism policy at a national level. Do you feel that you are being heard? Do you feel your community is being heard?
Oh, fuck.
Ooh. Could just check that you're on mute, please. Apologies for the language there to folk. Okay, we're nearly there. People are I'm aware that people are typing and trying to fill in polls, so I'm trying to slow up. It's quite strange doing it in this way. You know, obviously normally we'd all be in a room together and I'd get to chat to you all and get to meet you all properly, which would be lovely. One day we'll get to do that. Okay, there's just a few more folk just to answer the question. The answer to this one hasn't hugely surprised me, interestingly. So we're on 93% of you have voted. I'll just give it a couple more seconds and then I'm going to end the polling and share the vote. Oh, going up again. Okay. Everybody had an opportunity to pop something in. Okay, I'm going to share that. Everybody see that? So this isn't a huge surprise for me. I think because obviously working with the Tourism Social Enterprise Network, this really has been our driving force around the work that we've been doing is the conversation around the lack of representation, and that communities, whether rural or urban, feeling that their voice isn't heard at a national level. So I think that that's something that we can kind of take forward and continue to talk about. And again, please use the chat function to kind of pick out any particular areas around this, any thoughts around it. It's not an easy one to come up with a solution for either. So solutions, put some solutions in there. You know, we want to hear folks' ideas. I think this has been a really useful exercise. And as I say, we're going to use this information. So you're not just doing it for the sake of it. We're going to use this information and take that forward. So I'll obviously use it in the research. We'll be sharing it with government, with those national bodies that are involved in tourism as well, to make sure that they're kind of hearing, you know, communities' voices, hearing what people are saying around this. Okay. So remembering that you can continue to use your chat function all the way through this, and we want to continue to hear your voice. I am now going to move on to our panel discussion, because I think that gives us a nice amount of time to hear from our panelists, but also if you have any questions, if you want to pop them into the chat, Lena and Artemis have kindly said that they will keep an eye on the chat function for me and highlight any questions that would be, if we've got some time for the questions at the end. So I'm going to, it's rather difficult because on the screen, but I'd like to welcome our panel members. So first of all, we have Wendy Reid, who's the development manager at the Isle of Ulva. Wendy, could you give us a wave? Are you there? Oh, you're down in my corner. Can folks see Wendy? We have Mark Tate, the CEO from Cairngorms Business Partnership. Mark, could you give us a wave if you're on the screen? Oh, there you are. And we've got Julia Lato, who's the project manager in the Police Directorate at Scottish Enterprise. Julia, can you give us a wave as well? You're at the bottom of my screen and you were hidden by the chat function, but you're there. Okie dokie. So I think first of all, what would be really useful is if I could just ask the panel members to give themselves a very quick introduction and maybe just offer a reflection on the polls, some of the stuff that's come out in that, and any thoughts that they have about the future opportunities they see for tourism in Scotland. Wendy, can I start with you?
Yes, of course you can. Nice to see everybody, and thank you for asking me to take part today. It's been really interesting so far. As Sarah has said, I'm the development manager for the community-owned island of Ulva, and the rationale behind the community taking on ownership of the island of Ulva was one of repopulation and regeneration, and for an area like ours, we're a small island off the northwest coast of Mull. So we're an island off an island when the community took ownership of the island, resident population of 5 people, but with huge potential for more. So the rationale was one of repopulation and regeneration. And the main focus of regeneration, not just regeneration, but the main focus of what we want to do is to try and have an island that is one where people can come and live and work sustainably and be able to come and stay here and live here. And one of the ways of doing that is by developing tourism on the island, because it's one of those the kind of key areas for potential economic development. So we have quite an interest in how we're going to do that. And we think that tourism opportunities may be one of the ways that will attract new residents to the island alongside other things. So we're just in the early stages of doing all that, really. And we'll be watching with interest to see how things develop elsewhere. I think reading some of the stuff that's come through, the comments coming through the polls and in response to the polls, it's not anything that to be honest we haven't heard before when we talk about tourism in rural communities. And I do think that there's tensions in all of this, because as you develop tourism, the demands on communities and infrastructure increase. So while you get more visibility, which is great, and that may bring in some economic advantages, I'm not necessarily convinced that the economic benefits flow out and down to those smaller communities and people within their own businesses within those communities. And it's how we manage all of that in a way that makes people feel that tourism is a positive thing. I mean, I have friends that live in Ullapool, for instance, and actually they really now don't like Ullapool in the summer because it gets completely invaded by people doing the Northwest 5 or the North Coast 500 who come through. They have little respect for the village as it is, for village life, for how the village operates, and they're in and out. They take up accommodation, they book it up way in advance. So people that used to go there for a week and be regular visitors are now priced out of the market. So there are tensions around tourism and how it develops and what some people see as a good thing and others see as a bad thing. I think there's also tensions between resident populations who are not involved in tourism business and how they feel about increased tourism, and those that are involved in economic activity in a community who really see the financial benefit from tourism. So I think there's lots of things that need to be balanced. It strikes me that in terms of potential, that what COVID has done is I think there's going to be a much bigger increased interest in local tourism markets, so people within the UK wanting to travel locally as opposed to going overseas. And I think that's going to bring increased popularity. It's going to bring increased demand. But I think from a community tourism perspective, there is opportunity to develop smaller scale things that give people a much more personalized experience. Often why people come to places is because they want to feel part of somewhere and they're interested in the place. And the more they can find out about the place and the more they feel that they can engage and be part of the place, the better the experience that they get. And the more likely they might be to become repeat and return visitors, and those repeat and return visitors come with a greater degree of respect for the place to which they are visiting. So I think that there's opportunity to deliver smaller scale, much more personalized experiences for people. And I think that as remote or rural communities find ways of developing that using local resources and local knowledge, as Andrew highlighted in his provocation, I think there's also opportunities for communities to be working together more to promote their experiences. So you just go to one community, but you can be tapped into other community-led experiences in other local communities. So you can have a broader range of experience when you go. And, what about having some kind of community-led travel agency or tourist agency that packages something together for people that would allow you to go and do one thing in one community and maybe stay there a few days, but then somebody would book you in and point you to other community-led opportunities in other places that are in a similar geographic location. So I think there are opportunities around communities working more closely together, and community organizations that are managing visitor tourism facilities to offer packages that cater for people who are interested in that community level type activity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. And I'm loving the idea of a community-led travel agency. I think, can somebody set that up, please? Got somebody in the room who fancies setting something new up? I
mean, Sarah, I got just as a quick, where I got this idea was from, was a few years ago. I went and visited Kyrgyzstan because I had a friend who was working out there, and they have a fantastic community-led tourism project in Kyrgyzstan, whereby the different villages, I mean, it's entirely different, and the legislation will be different, and health and safety issues and all sorts. But what they had was they recruited local people in various villages to see what resources they had available in those villages that they could offer to visitors. Whether it was they had a horse that you could go horse riding on, or they would do various things, and there was a lead person within each village. And you could go to a website and to a kind of coordinator point and say, I quite fancy doing this range of stuff or visiting these places. And they would organize you with a local driver to take you there. They would organize you with a local somebody who was letting out rooms in their house. They would organize you, they would tie you up with. And if you then want in two or three communities, they would again get a driver from the next community to come and pick you up and take you on to the next place. So you could build a week's holiday around visiting different small communities and staying and engaging in locally led activities without you having to do a huge amount of research for yourself. And it was absolutely brilliant. There were evaluation forms at every place we stayed, asking what they could do better. So I think we need to be more welcoming. If we're going to do that sort of stuff, we need to see it as something that we engage in because we believe in it, not because it's a lifestyle thing and you kind of want to take advantage of people, but we want to give people a really, really good experience and send them on somewhere else where they get an equally good experience to showcase what's possible and what's best about the country that we live in. So at that point, I'll shut up.
I know, I think that's really interesting, and actually it passes over quite nicely to Mark, obviously, to give himself an introduction as well. But coming from a position of being involved at a national level, Mark, I think it would be interesting to get your perspective on some of these conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. So my name is Mark Tate, and I work for the Cairngorms Business Partnership. We are, first and foremost, we're a Chamber of Commerce for the Cairngorms National Park. So we have over 400 members. We're a private sector organisation. And because tourism, the visitor economy, is such an integral part of the economy in the Cairngorms, we operate the destination management organisation Visit Cairngorms. So our job is to support businesses, to represent businesses, and to promote the area, to attract visitors, and to connect those visitors to businesses and opportunities. I'm also involved at a national level with the National Visitor Management Group, which is looking at how we promote. How we better promote responsible enjoyment, particularly of our glorious countryside in Scotland. I'm involved nationally in the Scottish Tourism Task Force, which is looking at recovery from the last 12 months, which of course have been devastating. I think for locally in the Cairngorms, the visitor economy is so big that it's difficult for communities not to see the benefit and the connection, particularly over the last 12 months when we've seen, people's favourite cafes closing for good because they just basically can't operate anymore. So in some ways, it's a little easier for us to create that direct link between the benefit of visitors to communities than it may be for some others. I think, I absolutely chime with what Andrew was saying in his presentation, and part of our mantra over the last 2 years probably has been that communities are an integral part of the visitor proposition here in the Cairngorms. The visitors experience the nature, the wildlife, the scenery, the activities through the eyes of the communities that they stay with, that they interact with, from the local shops to the post office to the people on the ScotRail trains that bring them here. So it's a symbiotic relationship. It's not them and us, and that's really been brought home over the last 12 months. And we've upped our game and recognised that we need to do more as a destination organisation to really engage with communities, and that was really brought home to us during the first lockdown, when we recognised that as we did reopen for visitors, we needed to do so in a way that gave confidence to communities, to employees, and to those visitors. And we worked very closely with the National Park Authority, and I think a couple of members of the Park Authority are on the call, to achieve that. And we've run a number of just open Zoom sessions for any member of the community to come and share their hopes and fears about reopening. And we just actually reran those sessions last week about this phase of reopening. We've talked to community councils, we've talked to local authority councillors, but we recognise we need to do more. And we do recognise that communities are a real. I'd go further than if it's good for the tourist, it's good for the community. It's a symbiotic relationship. The two work hand in hand here. I think we do have a responsibility as a destination organisation to ensure that we're promoting responsible tourism. And all the comments about slow tourism, absolutely. Everybody wants higher value tourism, higher value visitors. But then I did notice one comment in the chat, or a comment that was made about Ullapool, that, we get higher value visitors and then we're pricing out our previous visitors who were lower value visitors. So there's complications all over the place, but there is a huge opportunity. There's a huge opportunity with the Newmarket last year that we saw visit the countryside. There are challenges with that opportunity, but it is an opportunity. We are really positive about the future. We think the international market, all the data tells us the international market will come back very strongly when it's allowed to, and some of that domestic market we'll hang on to. We know that once people visit the Cairngorms, 60% of them come back again within 5 years. So all those new visitors are new, loyal, repeat visitors. But I'm really interested to have a discussion, answer questions. It's really difficult to keep up with the chat because so many people are typing so much good stuff in it all the time. So flag anything that you'd like me to comment on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll come back to some questions. I certainly have some questions as well. So we'll come back to those in a moment. But I just wanted to give Julia a chance to introduce herself. And I think it's really useful to have somebody coming from that support side as well. So Wendy's obviously representing the community. Mark, you're very much involved at a national level and working with private sector, although, as you've just pointed out, communities are part of the tourism industry as well. But Julia, I think it'd be really interesting to hear your point of view as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi everyone, it's great to be here. I'm also really interested in the chat, but I'm trying to keep up as well, so it's quite difficult. So I'm Julia Lato and I work for Scottish Enterprise, and I've been in the rural team for 15 years, and before that for Scottish Enterprise Borders. So I'm a borderer and a holiday locally. I've been to Kirkcudbright for a week's holiday 3 years ago, so it was great to see the video. So holidaying locally and supporting local businesses is my passion. It was a few things that's already been touched on, but there's one thing that was in the chat by Kat, which really resonated about, you know, this kind of collaborating between the local people and also local assets, and really, you know, one of my things that I kind of lead on a number of national projects for Scottish Enterprise for Rural, and it all links back to people. So I lead on the Rural Leadership Programme, and also on the Agri-Tourism Monitor Farm Programme. And the other programme is Plan Succeed, which is around collaboration. So for me, it's about the people and about developing people to really, you know, lead in a way which, you know, they know their area, they know their businesses, and a great example of that was when I went to Kirkcudbright. You know, I stayed at the Solway View Holiday Park, which is run by Patricia and her husband. It's a tremendous place. Went to Galloway Lodge for our scones, and I think somebody else mentioned this. I think it was yourself, Wendy, about, you know, when you go to a local area, local people then say, oh, and then you need to go to Laggan. So we did that, and we had a great experience there. So I think for me, it's about everyone in an area working together. Yeah. I don't want to maybe kind of hold up too much of your time, but that's a kind of short introduction from myself.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think it would be useful, I mean, I've got some questions, but I think it would be maybe useful to open up if anybody else has any questions that they would like to ask just now, or any comments that they would like that the panel could come back with. Will I give you all a minute to think about questions? I think that, so there are a few things that have come out for me. Obviously, as we go forward, we're very much looking around at how communities are supported and how best to support them going forward. We've had a fair few comments in the chat function, but I wondered if the panel members had any thoughts around how, you know, how we take this forward. I feel in a session like this, we're somewhat preaching to the converted. So, but there are others out there that really don't understand the benefit that community brings to the tourism industry, and how important community actually is, that maybe community ought to be coming first. So some of your thoughts around how best we could support communities to take ownership of their tourism offer, to plan their own tourism strategy in the current climate. And then we'll get some questions. Do Andy or Mark or Julia, do you have any thoughts?
Gordon Adams got a point, Sarah, sorry.
Sorry?
Gordon Adams got his hand up.
All right, okay. Gordon, you want to go first?
Yes, hello. I chair the Highland Council Tourism Committee, and so I come to this from a particular point of view. But really to underscore a lot of what you've been saying, there's a limit to what government can do. We don't have a great deal of money. Local authorities really have very limited money. I think it's £173 million required in order to mend the roads in the Highlands. We've got a budget this year of £20 million. National government can only do a certain amount. But I think the answer lies with private sector and the communities. And I put a note in the chat about one small initiative we're doing. We've managed to get £1.5 million for our visitor management plan agreed last week at our budget. But one of the things that we're doing is to try and make it easier for communities and for private individuals to set up airs, or we're calling it ARI, which is the Gaelic equivalent, safe stopping off places for camper vans. And we're trying to do this through encouraging them that this is actually something that can be done very simply, and guidance is going to be offered to show how this can be done with the absolute minimum of regulation. And I think there already is a lot of interest in this. And I think once we publish this guidance, there'll be a lot more. And that'll provide a major answer, I think, to what was a very big problem last year, which was overcrowding, because lots of people want to camp in nice little places where there's only 3 or 4 stances, or 5 perhaps, and not in great big campsites. And I think if we can take away the red tape, if you like, then that's one small way in which we can help. But there's no doubt about it that the answer to a lot of the tourism problems is with the communities and with, I would say, the private sector.
Mm.
Can I just come in here? I'm just going to pick up on what Gordon was saying there, because I actually think it's a very good point. And I'll give you an example. I think I'd mentioned this to yourself, Sarah. There's a couple of good examples. One was a number of years ago, when I lived in Hawick, which is where I'm from. We had an initiative, and it was just somebody had this idea, and they said, look, why don't we start welcoming tourists ourselves? We'll start wearing a local, I can't remember what the brand was, but basically ask us anything you want. We're local, and we're here to help you. And the feedback was absolutely incredible. And what it did do was it made people very proud of their place. And it actually, it gave people confidence, and people started saying, well, I'll volunteer for that. And it really brought a sense of coming together with an identity about local heritage, tradition, and being really proud. And the tourists absolutely loved it. Now, I then moved from there, and I'm in Peebles, and another example is around our tourism offering here, which was linked to what Andrew was saying was, what's good for, for the people is actually good for tourists, because we've got Eastgate Theatre, and we've also got Glentress. Now, those are great for the town, but they're also great for tourists. So it's just a couple of examples I wanted to say there that added to Gordon, but that one in Hawick, I still think what a brilliant idea. And it was just somebody that locally that had an idea saying, I think we personally should start, welcoming tourists ourselves.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. We've got a couple of questions. Ken had his hand up, and also Ed. So Ken, if you want to use your raise hand function as well, then I definitely don't miss you. So Ken, do you want to go first and followed by Ed? Ken, do you still have a question? No? No? Okay, let's go to Ed then, and then, John put his hand up as well.
Thank you. I've been interested in tourism for some while, having worked when I was 18 in Greece. I worked for a tourist company on a Greek island called Mykonos before I went up to uni. And throughout my life, I've always been interested in travel and so on. And I think there are several things that I think we need to do in the 21st century. One is to work together to have an app which all people involved in Scottish tourism can use for their community, rather than each individual community having to sort of set up the framework, which will include the things that people can visit, the pubs that they can go to, and all this sort of thing, which is really very important. And apps these days are very important to a lot of the younger generation. And I think today we've been talking quite a lot about the long stay tourism. I'm involved in the Lanark Shire Heritage Forum. I'm their chairman. And one of the things that we are concerned with is really the day out sort of tourism, which I think is also a very important aspect of tourism, to encourage people to explore their own local area. Mm-hmm. Indeed, we've discovered actually that the majority of visits to our museums are really basically from people within Lanarkshire rather than far away. And I think these are important things that we should consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I wonder if you have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think the start point of all of this has to be to put ourselves in the visitor's shoes and try and understand what's motivating the visitor to want to come, what's motivating, you know, what information does the visitor need. So I think a one size fits all type approach for every destination doesn't really work because of that. And actually the evidence would suggest that young people, you know, that don't use apps very much these days. It's all either through social media or through Google searches, and very few people even get past the first page of a Google search because it tells you what you want to know at the top of the Google search. So I think we need to try and put ourselves in the visitor's shoes, understand the motivations of the visitor, even the visitors that we think are destructive and unhelpful. Because until we do that, we'll always struggle to influence, to positively influence their behaviour. And I think, and on your question, Sarah, about engaging with communities, I mean, and how do communities get involved in the visitor experience? I think that for us, that's a challenge. As I say, we've held open sessions for community members. We've publicised them widely across all sorts of social media, community social media groups, etc. And we've had some new faces turn up, but predominantly it's the same people from the community groups. And as you said before, you know, you're kind of preaching to the converted. So but that's a challenge that's up to us to respond to and to figure. You know, our job is marketing. So if we can't market to our own communities and help to inspire them to get involved, then we stand no chance with our visitors and guests.
I suspect that some people in the room might have some thoughts around that and some suggestions that they could maybe pop in the chat. We've got another 3 questions, folk with their hands up here. So we'll go to John next, and then Ranald, and then Janet. So John, would you like to?
Yeah, hello, I'm in Orkney here. We hear a lot about over-tourism in the north and west of Scotland, but Eastern Caithness, Eastern Sutherland, North Caithness and Orkney, they're not overloaded, and these places already have good tourist infrastructure. There's good ferry available. There are 3 ferry companies to Orkney. Only one gets a national subsidy. The 2 others don't. Pentland ferries take half the traffic, but they don't get a subsidy. They run modern catamarans, which are widespreadly used in other parts of Europe and the world. And there's also a 6-month passenger service from John O'Groats to Berwick, 7 miles away. So we're close to Northern Scotland. We're close to NC 500, and we can use more visitors. We would also like to see the season increased into the springtime and into the autumn and so on. The weather's what it is, but we've had lots of sunshine here along with the snow over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and we've had very little wind this winter as well. So good weather for holidays, actually, if you want to come off peak.
Funnily enough, we were just talking about ferries and island holidays just before the session started. I don't know, Wendy, if you have any thoughts around that. You're on the West Coast, and have you been suffering with over-tourism at all, or are you in a similar situation that people are, obviously not during COVID, but you know, those gaps in between lockdown? Were you seeing people coming in, or are you kind of in the same position?
I mean, I can't really comment. I mean, I've only been here for just about 18 months. And in the 18 months I've been here, most of that has been in COVID scenarios. So and, you know, Ulva's not Mull. So Ulva's not been open to visitors at all during COVID, because we just couldn't bring people across on the boat. You know, we have a small passenger ferry that takes 12 people, and we could not maintain social distancing in any fashion on that. So we just haven't been open at all. I know just from looking at chat on Mull that there was real concerns about opening up and visitors coming out width of times that people thought they should be there, and there's a whole so it, you know, the COVID scenarios is a different set of circumstances, and I'm not sure that really is going to reflect what the long-term scenario is going to be like. Mull is extraordinarily popular, as is anywhere else on the West Coast, but not anywhere else. I mean, I do think that certain places seem to become fixated in people's minds. And that's got to be about how they're marketed, where they're marketed, and national campaigns featuring places. And there's a lot of brilliant stuff and brilliant places that never gets a look in and never gets mentioned. And so people, if they're looking, hear about the same places all the time, and it always gets, and so there are some places that are really over visited, and yet other places just down the road that barely see anybody, but have potentially equally interesting and beautiful things to visit and see. So there is something about, you know, national campaigns and actually what impact national campaigns have at a really local level. Yeah. So when you were asking before about what needs to be done to get a better voice, I think there is lack of visibility at national level about community-led tourism and what happens at local level. Mm-hmm. So when things are being discussed about how do we market, what are the marketing strategies and campaigns for Scotland, community tourism in Scotland is not something that is picked up at those national levels. It may be at more regional levels and everybody's doing it, but you get national campaigns that tend to send people to the same places. They're still punting the same picture of what Scotland is about, and doesn't really connect that with on the ground grassroots community stuff that's going on that does actually reflect some of those national campaign themes, but doesn't get reflected in the way in which those campaigns are run.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Ranald, you had your hand up. Would you like to?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. I was just curious as to what efforts are being made to better understand the visitor economy. Because there's a saying that, you know, you can't manage what you don't measure, if you like. And I'm not saying you should take that too literally, because obviously there are privacy and security considerations as well, but you know, what is the visitor economy worth to places like, you know, Oban or Mallaig or Mull or Isle or Campbelltown? And it's, you know, for me, there's nowhere near enough research or understanding of the visitor economy in Scotland. And you hear figures, or, you know, we'll kind of refer to figures about 11-12 billion pounds, you know, the tourism sector's worth in Scotland, or maybe 5-6 billion, excluding parts of supply chain, etc. But you know, if you actually look into the data quality, it's very woolly, and, you know, you're dealing with international passenger surveys, and you know, there's a huge body of work that needs to be done there. And I think even if you were using some of those figures or had confidence in some of these figures, I say 11-12 billion pounds, if then on top of that you have, for example, I know it's kind of just been increased relatively recently, but a £3 million rural tourism infrastructure fund, you know, 3 million rural tourism infrastructure fund, 11-12 billion pound sector, if you like, you know, some things don't add up. And I think, you know, there are questions around that. So probably, although the community and businesses certainly need to do, you know, a lot more, I think there certainly are questions in terms of kind of local government, national government, in terms of what they could be. There are some things the private sector just simply cannot do or won't be able to do. So yeah, I suppose that's part of it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I wonder, Julia, if you have any thoughts around that, and also Mark, if you have.
Yeah, thank you. I think I was just listening to that. I mean, I think it is a really interesting point. And just to, you know, going to the experience with agri-tourism, Ranald, it was, you know, it became quite evident last year with the pandemic that quite a number of businesses were missing out on the support. Now, what they did do was, and I feel like I'm a broken record with this one, is around collaboration and strengthening the voice collectively. And that actually made a difference. So, you know, not having a one voice, but, you know, as a sector, these agri-tourism businesses came together and said to government, you know, we're actually falling through the cracks here. And what they needed was examples, you know, good examples that really demonstrated, you know, because, you know, there's not a bottomless pit, and we need to actually look at what, and last year I think demonstrated, certainly for some businesses as well, maybe how they were structured, certainly within farms as well, and how their accounts and all of that. So I'm not going to go into the technical aspects, but I think the pandemic certainly demonstrated for some that, you know, they actually needed to work together. So I maybe not answering your question exactly, because when it comes to individual businesses and individual circumstances, it's quite different. But I mean, I can only go with businesses that I work with, you know, it's sometimes very difficult. But I think if you put your case forward in a way that demonstrates, you know, what's got to be for the economic argument, you know, with jobs and for your community, etc. But yes, so it has been very difficult.
Yeah, thank you. Mark, do you have any thoughts on gathering some of that data and information? I mean, you guys obviously will be gathering some data, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to gather.
No, it's definitely not the easiest. And Ranald, I will always take more data, because we are, you know, we're very, very data driven in terms of what we promote, how we promote it, the impact that we have. We have reasonable data, and maybe we have better data. Again, we're fortunate, we're in a national park, so we've got good support structures. We have reasonable data. You know, we know our visitor economy is worth about 300 million, employs about 5,000 of our 19,000 population, and that's not working population. So it's, you know, 50% of people directly employed in the visitor economy. We know we've got over 2 million visitors a year, and how long they stay for, and so we've got actually better data than a lot of places. But I would always take some more, and we've got a reasonable understanding of our visitors and segmentation of our visitors and what motivates them, etc. I think the visitor data is somewhere that's something we could improve on.
Yeah,
I think we've got a reasonable handle on it.
I think I'm just going to move on very quickly, because I'm aware that we're kind of closing in on the finish, and we still have some folk with some questions. I'm going to go to Janet. We'll kind of see how we do for time, but please, if you haven't had your question answered, please put it into the chat, because we will get back to you with information. We'll do our very best to follow up on everything. So Janet, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. My question was really going to be about how we could advocate on behalf of more public transport across the rural areas for tourism. But just to touch first of all on why I'm here. I'm actually here as a community councillor, not as one of the few people, if not the only one, who is owned up to being part of the private sector in tourism. I only have one small self-catering property, but it makes me feel like a villain in this company, because I know that people are so concerned that I have to justify myself by saying that I was the only one in the village. We are an industrial village. There is no tourism. We have like one pub, my self-catering, one guest house, and it's a village of less than 1,000, which is within very, very easy commuting distance of the Central Belt. So having said that, I hope you forgive me for having a self-catering property. I have found that it's been something which, you know, has made me think about how we as a country retain the value of tourism in our communities, because I tried as a community councillor to establish links with the Smart Village people, and this is where I was reminded of that by the comment that was made about the need for an app. Our community certainly didn't feel that they wanted us to investigate the Smart Village project, even though you know, it was something that was at that point a free pilot, and that was because it was based on a portal, and everyone just, you know, couldn't see the point. We've even got quite a good community council website. The other point was that there is a potential conflict there, because the community council chair and I were the only two community councillors who wanted to set up a meeting with businesses. And because I have a self-catering, one other community councillor, I think, thought you know, this was like a conflict, which in no way was it, you know, and but in small communities, it's quite difficult to take the lead, either from the private sector, because why would the community come to hear about community tourism from the private sector, or as a community council, because there's always a hostility to anything that might seem to be promoting a business. I think that's wrong, but it's there. And apart from that, my relationship with my business and the community is brilliant. So I just step back from any leadership on that, and it's a pity. Anyway, the point was, how do we, as a community of people who are interested in community tourism, which to me would be the better long-term sustainable solution for ownership, not having all sorts of hotels owned by people who don't even live in Scotland, how do we do this, and how do we advocate for more public transport? Because otherwise it becomes an unsustainable in the future solution.
An excellent question to finish on, I think. I think we'll go.
I'm feeling cross. I'm feeling defensive because of being a tourism.
I don't think you should feel defensive. I think that something that we need to recognise that its community is made up of everybody. It's made up of people who work in the third sector, people who work in the private sector, people who don't work at all. It's made up of children. It's made up of older people who are retired. It's made up of everybody. Everybody's part of their community, and how engaged they are in that community is entirely up to them. Obviously, we would like them to be more engaged when it comes to tourism. That's kind of why we're here. But I don't think, and everybody comes with a different point of view and a different reason for being there, whether that's an economic reason or whether it is very focused on a community benefit. But I don't think that you're the enemy at all. You're very much at the heart of the conversation. It would be good just to, I'm very much aware we're now running over time, but I think that if we could just maybe go to each of the panelists, if you have any thoughts on that question and any closing thoughts, that would be really useful. Wendy, will we start with you?
Sorry, I got distracted a little bit and I lost track of exactly what you were wanting at the end of your question, Janet.
So, sorry, Wendy, not surprising because I had a very, very long prologue.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
About, advocating for better public transport to make it possible to travel around.
Yeah, I mean, transportation is always a really tricky thing, and you've got that balance between. Most people who live in a rural area will have their own transport and don't rely on public transport because it's not reliable, and therefore the public transport that people say, well, we don't have any people using it, so we don't need a service. So it's a bit of a kind of a negative cycle. Interestingly, on Mull, there is a really good community transport service run by the Mull Community Trust, and a community bus that links the ferry terminal with the north side of the island that doesn't necessarily have a great public transport service, and it's for use by tourists and for locals, and you can dial up and book it, and it's been really successful. So there are ways of kind of transport being able to be subsidized or not subsidized, complemented by community run schemes that provide a much more focused and targeted service that meet the needs of the people that come here. And I think there are other opportunities to do that. And I think particularly, as we move to greener modes of transport, there will be more opportunities to look at how we can do things a bit more creatively around moving people about the country, and particularly in remoter areas. It's a typical one.
Yeah, thank you. Mark, we'll go to you just to answer this question. Any closing thoughts that you have on the session?
Yeah, real quick response. I'd like to respond mainly to Janet's embarrassment of having some self-catering accommodation. You should be extremely proud of that, and you're part of a fantastic visitor economy. But visitors who come to us they're giving us their most precious asset, which is their time. So people have 2-3 weeks off a year, and they're choosing to come and spend that with us in our communities. And I think our first reaction should be, that's fantastic. How do we welcome them? How do we embrace them? And how do we manage for them? I think in terms of transport, again, our visitors in the Cairngorms during the summer, our population doubles with visitors. So they're part of the transport solution. And I know there's a lot of work here happening on that, both this year and in the future with the next National Park Partnership Plan. So we can expect that to change. And my final plea really is let's stop thinking about all these silos of visitors, of communities, of businesses in the Cairngorms. Most of our businesses are families in our communities. And your point there, Janet, is it kind of nails it really, because it's impossible to find somebody who's not conflicted in some way, because everybody's got so many hats that does so many things. And we came up with the hashtag Cairngorms together during COVID, and we are all in this together. So I think we need to stop thinking about silos and start thinking about just how we all work together to welcome visitors positively.
That's lovely, thank you. And we thought we'd lost Julia for a moment, but it looks like she may be back.
Sorry, yeah. I thought I had a meeting, but I've just actually asked if it could be rescheduled at 2:15 because I was quite keen to come back. So, yeah, it was just, I think I just obviously picked up what was on the back of that. But the transport one, I spoke to Sarah about an example a few years ago on Brydalbin. So I think I'd mentioned earlier about the Plan Succeed tourism collaboration projects I ran. And the Brydalbin one was a very good example. And the local community came together and formed a formal tourism cooperative. And collaboration was at the key to all of that. And they developed an initiative called the Ring of Brydalbin, which was an explorer bus project. Janet's nodding. I don't know if you've heard about that, Janet, but it was a brilliant example of local people coming together. And the explorer bus wasn't just for tourists, but it was actually for local people as well. And it was one of these moments in my career that I was like, that is a proud moment, but funding ran out, and it was a really unfortunate thing because we had Transport Scotland Fund just to kind of pilot it with the hope that it would become self-sustaining, and it didn't. And it was just one of these things that, you know, it was quite disappointing to see, but we tried it. It empowered local people. It was brilliant for tourists, but it just wasn't sustainable with the fund, and it was quite disappointing.
Sarah, can I just say something on the back of that? And I think Julia's response highlights something really important, and that is that at community level for community-led tourism, you often hear that something has been successful and then it stopped because the funding ran out. If we want to have sustainable rural communities, we have to accept that sometimes funding needs to continue for things, and there is no way on this earth that everything is going to become financially self-sustaining and that things need subsidizing. And good rural transport is got to be one of those things that we have to invest in. I mean, there's lots of other examples, but you know, the thing about community-led tourism is often you'll get funding to start something up, and then it becomes really successful, but then your support disappears. And I think what people fail to recognize and understand is there's so much support and financing going in to support initiatives in the private sector that's kind of hidden. And there's this perception that communities rely on grant funding to do things, but private sector doesn't. And it's a fallacy. And I think there needs to be a better understanding and recognition that if we want things to thrive in rural areas, then we need to subsidise them, and we need to fund them, and we need to resource them, not just in the short term and say, oh, we tried that and that didn't work because it couldn't sustain itself. Mm-hmm. You know, we've got to get beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably a good place to stop. I think we could probably carry on chatting about this right into the night, which is fantastic. And you have all been amazing and given us so much insight and information into your experience. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you to Andrew and the Kirkcudbright team for making the video as well. Thank you to our panelists, Wendy and Mark and Julia. I think that your involvement has been fantastic, and I've really enjoyed the session. And I really wish I was in the same room and I could meet you all afterwards and we could stand about having coffee and chatting, but sadly not the case this time. So perhaps the next Rural Parliament we can carry on some of the conversations. So thank you very much. And also thank you very much to Artemis and Jonathan and the team for hosting such a brilliant event as well. I hope you all are signed up to other sessions and going along and enjoying that too. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely afternoon. I hope the sun is still shining for you. It's raining for me now, just in time. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.